Every ancient teaching begins with the same forbidden admission. The universe is not a mystery. It's a code. Not symbolism, not poetry, but an active operating script running underneath everything you feel, think, and project. And the moment you realize this, the old texts stop sounding mystical and start sounding like technical manuals written in metaphor, because language wasn't strong enough to explain raw power directly. When she revealed the fragments of knowledge buried for centuries, the most startling part wasn't the information. It was the precision. The ancients weren't guessing how reality behaves. They were documenting the mechanics of a code-based system long before we had the words pattern, signal, or feedback loop. They understood that every emotional surge is a command, every intention is a line of instruction, and every unresolved fear is a corrupted script running in the background, distorting how life responds to you. What modern people call intuition, they treated as an interface. What we call coincidence, they recognized as a response from the system itself. And the deeper I went into what she uncovered, the clearer it became. These teachings weren't lost because they were irrelevant. They were buried because they make you ungovernable. Because once you see your life as a living code, you stop begging for change and start rewriting the script from within. You stop reacting to reality and begin issuing direct energetic commands that reorganize events before they even reach you. That is the real reason these secrets were hidden. They give you access to the underlying architecture of experience, the part of reality that still assumes you're asleep. The deeper she went into those cracked tablets and half-erased diagrams, the more one pattern repeated itself. The ancients didn't see reality as a place you live in. They saw it as a programmable environment that reacts to internal code before external action. And the most disturbing mechanism she decoded was this. Every thought isn't just a mental event. It's an instruction broadcast into a responsive matrix that mirrors the structure of the signal, not the content of your words. They described it simply. The code listens beneath language, meaning your emotional charge is the syntax, your focus is the algorithm, and your nervous system is the processor that compiles every intention you emit. If you're scattered, the command splits. If you're afraid, the command loops. If you're divided inside, the system receives two conflicting scripts and generates outcomes that feel like sabotage, when in truth, the matrix is just following your internal fragmentation line by line. She found an old fragment that shocked both of us, an instruction written like a warning. A divided heart corrupts the script. They believed internal contradiction wasn't a personal flaw. It was a technical error that destabilized your field and forced the outer world to compensate with chaos. Arguments that erupt for no reason, devices glitching at the exact moment you doubt yourself, opportunities vanishing the moment you hesitate. Not random events, but the system trying to resolve conflicting code. And when she applied this mechanism to everyday life, everything snapped into clarity. The moment you hesitate before speaking your truth, the matrix delays the response. The moment you carry resentment while asking for progress, the matrix receives a dual command and returns mixed results. The moment you want expansion but feel unworthy, the matrix prioritizes your emotional script over your verbal intention every single time. This is why so many people feel like life ignores their effort, because the matrix never responds to effort. It responds to coherence of code. And here's the part the world was never meant to remember. When your internal script unifies, reality doesn't wait. It obeys. People love to say ancient wisdom is mystical, but the first myth she shattered was exactly that. There was nothing vague or dreamy in what they wrote. Their entire system treated human emotion as executable code, not metaphorically, literally. And the biggest misconception they dismantled was the modern belief that desire is what shapes reality. They insisted the real driver is emotional logic, the hidden instruction buried under what you think you want. To prove it, she used a scenario we all know too well. An argument, sharp, sudden, unresolved. You walk away furious, thinking you've let it go, but your chest is still tight, your breath sharp, your mind looping the last line you wish you had said. On the surface, you've moved on. But inside, your system just received a very different command. I'm still in conflict, and the matrix interprets it with brutal accuracy. Hours later, your phone dies at 30%. A message you needed to send refuses to deliver. Someone bumps into you in public like they didn't see you. You misplace a key you never misplace. Modern people call it coincidence. The ancients called it spillover code, residual emotional charge running a background script that distorts everything in your field until the system can restabilize you. They even had a term for it, the echo that obeys no words, meaning that once the emotional charge activates, the matrix stops listening to your conscious intention and follows the raw signal instead. This is why people often feel their day gets worse after a single emotional hit. It's not momentum, it's instruction. Where your mind says, "I'm fine," your internal code broadcasts, "I'm destabilized," and the environment mirrors the destabilization with precision. She showed me how they tested this. A single unresolved emotion, when held without awareness, produced predictable distortions in the environment, not supernatural, systematic. When your code is corrupted, the matrix compensates by generating friction until you reclaim the line of instruction. And the old texts were clear about it. Your emotional residue writes more of your reality than your intentions ever do. Yet there was one mechanism even more unsettling. The one she said was the true reason this knowledge stayed hidden. She told me the ancients treated the nervous system as the master compiler of the entire code, not a spiritual idea, a functional one. They believed your capacity to influence reality depends less on what you intend, and more on whether your internal processor can hold a stable signal long enough for the matrix to interpret it clearly. And once you see it like this, calm isn't about comfort anymore. It becomes a technical requirement for precision. They mapped this centuries before neuroscience. When your breath becomes shallow, your field becomes noisy. When your heartbeat spikes, the signal becomes fragmented. When your muscles tense, the code begins to stutter. In their view, anxiety wasn't weakness. It was a broken line of instruction causing the system to receive jittered commands, resulting in outcomes that appear unpredictable, but only because you're sending mixed signals faster than you can consciously track. She showed me a small clay diagram, a spiral carved into intersecting lines. It represented the stabilizer. Their belief was simple. When the nervous system settles, the code becomes readable. And when the code becomes readable, reality adjusts with far less resistance because no contradictory instructions are being broadcast. To prove this, she had me run a practice their initiates used before issuing any intention into the matrix. It takes less than a minute, but the effect is immediate. Exhale fully until the body softens. Inhale slowly for 4 counts. Hold for 2. Exhale for 6. Then place attention on one point just below the ribs, not imagining anything, simply noticing sensation. After 10 seconds, the internal noise drops. After 20, the emotional signal organizes. At 35, the code stabilizes enough for clarity to return. The ancients believed this brief reset did more to shape reality than hours of forced visualization. Because once the nervous system locks into coherence, the matrix receives one clean instruction instead of a scattered storm of impulses. She said the reason calm was revered in every ancient school wasn't philosophical, it was strategic. Stability gives your intention executable form, the same way clean code gives a program the ability to run without error. When the inner processor steadies, the external world follows with unnerving precision. She told me the ancients never saw emotion as something to soothe. They saw it as voltage, the most volatile part of the human code, the part powerful enough to rewrite an entire trajectory in seconds when directed, or collapse it when ignored. And this was the revelation that changed everything for me. Emotion is not the obstacle to clarity. It's the fuel that powers the command behind it. The old texts were ruthless in their precision. They said fear is compressed charge, anger is accelerated charge, grief is dissipating charge, and desire is directional charge. None of these states were judged. They were measured. Because for them, emotion wasn't a psychological moment. It was raw data that amplified whatever code you were transmitting. If your intention is a line of instruction, then emotion is the voltage that determines how far the instruction travels through the matrix. But here's the part she emphasized with a seriousness I'll never forget. If you don't consciously choose the direction of your emotional surge, the surge chooses for you, meaning the very moment you feel something deeply, a spike of jealousy, a flash of frustration, a punch of insecurity, your system releases a surge of charge that immediately looks for the most dominant internal narrative to power up. So if the strongest pattern in you is, "I'm not enough," the charge feeds that script. If the strongest pattern is, "Things slip away from me," the charge strengthens that loop. If the strongest pattern is, "I'm being overlooked," the matrix receives that as priority instruction. But here's what the ancients mastered, and why their teachings were buried. They learned to weaponize the surge, not by suppressing emotion, but but by capturing the spike in the exact second it rises and redirecting it into the code they choose instead of the one their wounds would autopilot. Imagine a flash of anger hitting your chest, and instead of spiraling, you channel that voltage into a single instruction: forward. Imagine fear tightening your gut, and within 2 breaths, you convert the charge into clarity. Imagine insecurity rising, and you reassign its energy to precision instead of collapse. This was the real ancient art: voltage without distortion, charge without sabotage, emotion without fragmentation. And the moment you understand how to intercept that surge, everything you emit gains a sharpness reality can't ignore. Yet the world still doesn't know the most dangerous part of this system. She waited until I had fully grasped the mechanics before revealing the part almost no surviving text states directly, not because it was forgotten, but because it was too dangerous in the wrong hands. The ancients understood that your energetic code isn't only written by you. It can be influenced, disrupted, or even hijacked by fields stronger, louder, or more chaotic than yours. And they documented these intrusions with the same precision they used to describe breath, intention, and charge. They called it field displacement. The moment another person's emotional voltage temporarily overrides your internal script. Not possession, not magic, just physics. If someone is broadcasting a stronger charge than the one you're holding, their pattern can imprint on your system before you even notice the transfer. To show me what this looked like, she used a scenario most people know intimately. You're calm, focused, steady, until you walk into a room where someone is simmering with unspoken frustration. No words exchanged, not even eye contact. But within seconds, your chest tightens, your jaw locks a little, and your thoughts start to speed up in ways that don't feel like yours. That's field displacement. Your code hasn't failed. It's been momentarily overwritten. The ancients mapped this intrusion as a 3-step sequence. The incoming field spikes, your nervous system absorbs the pressure, and your internal code attempts to adjust to maintain stability, often by mirroring the dominant emotional state in the room. This is why a single stressed person can destabilize an entire environment with no overt action. Energy travels faster than behavior. But the real power lies in what they discovered next. The hijack stops the moment you reclaim command. And reclaiming command requires only one action: interrupting the automatic agreement your system made with the external field. She taught me their simplest method, used in crowded markets and political courts where fields collided constantly. Step 1. Exhale sharply through the nose. Step 2. Drop your attention into the center of your body. Step 3. Issue one internal line of code. Not a sentence, just a direction. Mine. The shift is immediate. The external pattern collapses. The internal script reboots. This is how they walked through chaos without absorbing chaos. How they stayed sovereign in environments designed to fracture the mind. How they prevented their code from being rewritten by someone else's storm. But once you protect the code, the next challenge is learning how to consciously rewrite it. And that was the part she said separates the initiated from everyone else. By the time she unfolded the toolkit, it felt less like learning techniques and more like being handed the controls to a system I had been unconsciously influencing my entire life. The ancients didn't just observe how the code reacted. They developed precise methods to reprogram it, on demand, with shockingly little effort. And every method followed one principle: simplicity stabilizes, complexity distorts. The first technique was what she called breath code sync, not breathwork, synchronization. The idea was simple. Your breath is the clock of your internal processor. When the rhythm evens out, the code compiles cleanly. When the rhythm stutters, the signal scatters. So the practice is direct. Inhale slowly as if pulling the instruction inward, hold for a second, then release the exhale as if sending the command outward. Not visualizing, instructing. The breath becomes the carrier, the intention becomes the script. The second method was charge reset, the fastest way to clear corrupted emotional residue before it begins distorting the matrix. She taught me to place a hand over the sternum, breathe once deeply, and on the exhale, allow the body to soften just 3%. That micro-release drops the voltage enough for the emotional surge to lose dominance, breaking the loop before it gains momentum. The third was focus redirect. The ancients believed attention behaves like a magnetic cursor. Wherever you place it, the code begins to rewrite. So instead of fighting intrusive thoughts or lingering fear, you move your attention to the place in your body that feels the most neutral. Not peaceful, neutral. Neutrality is stable ground. From there, the code realigns itself. And the fourth method was what every ancient school relied on, the field seal. One breath inward, one breath downward, one breath outward. A triangular motion that signals the system to close openings created by stress, overwhelm, or external influence. It's subtle but immediate. You feel your edges return. You feel the internal noise quiet. You feel the code return to your command. Before she closed the tablet, she added something unexpected, a question meant to wake the subconscious. Have you ever walked into a room and felt your mood shift instantly, like the air itself spoke first? Tell me the most vivid moment you've felt this happen. She warned me that once you begin rewriting your own code, the matrix responds faster, which sounds like an advantage until you see the traps that come with it. The ancients documented these obstacles with almost surgical clarity because they believed most people lose power not from weakness, but from energetic leaks created by unconscious habits that fracture the signal before it completes its instruction. The first trap is the split current effect. This happens when you hold two intentions at once, not consciously, but emotionally. You say you want progress, but a quiet part of you fears exposure. You ask for opportunity, but another part clenches at the thought of failure. The matrix doesn't choose between these. It mirrors both simultaneously, producing events that feel contradictory because the internal code is contradictory. The ancients treated indecision as a distortion, not a personality trait. The second trap is overforce, pushing the code so hard that it breaks rhythm. When you try to force results, your breath compresses, your body tightens, and the command becomes jagged. A distorted signal can't travel far, so the matrix returns outcomes that feel delayed, unstable, or incomplete. They believed power requires precision, not pressure. Force creates noise. Noise corrupts code. The third trap is narrative recursion, the mind replaying the same internal storyline so frequently that the code becomes locked in a loop. This is why people relive the same emotional patterns year after year. The loop isn't psychological nostalgia. It's a script the system keeps executing because it hasn't been interrupted at the energetic level. She said the moment you notice repetition, the loop is already weakening. Awareness breaks momentum. And the final trap is what she called the empty channel leak. Anytime you enter autopilot, scrolling without thought, speaking without intention, moving without presence, your system runs open, broadcasting a weak and unfocused signal. That open channel becomes susceptible to absorbing external patterns without your consent. The ancients feared autopilot more than anger or fear because emptiness invites foreign code. But here's the part she emphasized like a command. Every trap dissolves the moment you return to deliberate signal. One breath, one point of focus, one line of instruction. The matrix doesn't punish mistakes. It recalibrates to the last coherent signal you emit. When she finally showed me how to integrate everything in real time, it stopped feeling like theory and started feeling like a skill, something you use while moving, speaking, deciding, breathing. The ancients trained their initiates to stay coherent not in temples or rituals, but inside ordinary moments where the matrix listens the hardest. They believe that daily life is the true testing ground of the code because every interaction triggers micro-adjustments in your signal. She explained it like this. The matrix responds before you act, not after, meaning your internal state prepares the outcome before your behavior even begins. So the moment you wake up, before your mind catches a single thought, your field is already broadcasting the opening instruction of your day. If you wake with scattered breath, the day mirrors fragmentation. If you wake with soft presence, the day aligns smoother than logic can explain. She taught me a simple pattern to embody this. When you stand up in the morning, pause for 1 second. 1. Feel the weight of your feet. Let the breath settle naturally without shaping it. That micro-stillness acts like a calibration pulse, resetting the signal before the matrix starts reading your commands. Throughout the day, the integration becomes a rhythm. Before you speak in a tense conversation, drop the breath once. Before you send a message that carries emotional weight, check your chest for tension. Before you make a decision that affects your path, listen for the subtle difference between impulse and clarity. One feels sharp and chaotic, the other feels steady and unmistakably aligned. She even showed how this applies in motion. Walking becomes a broadcast. Speaking becomes code transfer. Pauses become recalibration points. Your presence becomes the instruction that precedes every outcome. But her final demonstration was the most startling. She asked me to recall a moment when everything felt like it was falling apart. The day your plans collapsed, your emotions surged, and nothing aligned. Then she said, "Look closely. Did the collapse begin outside? Or did it start as a tiny internal fracture you ignored?" The matrix always follows the first crack in the signal, even the ones so small you pretend not to feel them. And there was still one domain where this code revealed its most dramatic impact. She said the ancients measured power by one thing only: how far your code could reach into the domains that shape your destiny: money, relationship, purpose. These weren't life areas for them. They were extensions of the matrix that responded with amplified sensitivity, because each one carries emotional charge, and emotional charge multiplies the strength of your signal. Money, she explained, isn't about numbers. It's a frequency window. When your internal code is stable, opportunities appear almost suspiciously fast. Not luck, resonance. But the moment your signal fractures with doubt, urgency, or fear of loss, the matrix mirrors the instability through delayed payments, stalled progress, or sudden complications. The ancients tracked this with stunning accuracy. The financial field responds not to effort, but to internal coherence. A single breath taken before making a financial decision was considered a form of energetic accounting. Relationships reveal the code even faster. She told me the matrix amplifies interpersonal dynamics because two fields interacting create interference patterns, like overlapping waves. If your internal script is anchored, you influence the pattern. If it's unstable, the other field takes the lead. This is why arguments escalate instantly when both people broadcast fragmented signals, and why harmony appears effortless when one person holds a coherent center. She illustrated this with a scenario. You're preparing to speak with someone who matters, a partner, a friend, someone whose opinion carries weight. If your chest tightens just before the conversation, the code shifts. The matrix interprets the tension as uncertainty, and the interaction bends toward misunderstanding. But if you take a single slow breath and drop your attention into your body before speaking, the entire field reorganizes around your steadiness. This isn't psychology, it's physics of influence. And purpose, the most sensitive domain of all, responds to the quietest fluctuations in your code. Purpose isn't discovered, it's decoded. The matrix keeps placing impulses, signals, and openings in your path the moment your internal script aligns with clarity. But when your signal scatters even slightly, the path seems to vanish, not because it disappeared, but because your field stopped tuning into the signals guiding you. She said the secret buried for centuries was this: the matrix isn't testing you. It's synchronizing with the last internal command you emitted. But she wasn't finished. There was one final layer the ancients guarded more fiercely than any other. She told me the ancients feared only one thing: a human being who understood their own code so well that no external field, no emotional storm, no social pressure, and no hidden influence could override it. They called this state sovereignty, not as a political idea, but as an energetic configuration where your internal script becomes unhackable. And the deeper she explained it, the more I understood why this knowledge was buried, guarded, and fragmented across cultures that never even met. A sovereign human is unpredictable to systems built on manipulation. Sovereignty begins the moment you stop letting your reactions write your code for you. The ancients said reaction is borrowed instruction, a moment where your field lets the external world dictate your internal command. But when you interrupt the reaction, even for a single breath, you reclaim authorship. That interruption is the fracture in the old pattern where the new script enters. She explained sovereignty like a three-tiered structure. The first tier is internal primacy, the understanding that your emotional state sets the hierarchy for every external event. When your inner system is stable, the outer world loses its power to invade. You respond by choice, not reflex. The second tier is boundary integrity. Not physical boundaries, energetic ones. They described boundaries as the edges of your signal. When those edges weaken, other fields can imprint their patterns onto your code. But when the edges strengthen, you stop absorbing foreign charge. You stop mirroring noise. You stop inheriting chaos that isn't yours. You become a closed system with selective permeability, open when you choose, sealed when you decide. The third tier is directional command. This is the highest level of sovereignty, where your intention moves through reality without internal contradiction. You choose the instruction, you choose the tone, you choose the voltage. And because the code inside you is unified, the matrix responds with a clarity that looks supernatural to anyone who hasn't learned the mechanics. She said sovereignty isn't loud. It doesn't need to assert itself. It doesn't fight for influence or force outcomes. True sovereignty is quiet because it doesn't need validation. It simply broadcasts a signal so coherent that nothing destabilizing can take root. And she smiled when she said it, the buried secret everyone was never meant to rediscover. A sovereign code doesn't adapt to reality. Reality adapts to it. She placed the final tablet in my hands the way someone presents a key, not an artifact. And on its surface was the simplest diagram of all, a single line of code carved into a spiral, looping back into itself with absolute precision. The ancients used the spiral to represent one truth. The matrix doesn't move in straight lines. It folds, responds, recalculates, and returns every signal you emit with amplified accuracy. You are not moving through reality. You are programming it as you go. When she told me this, something clicked that I had felt my entire life but never named. Every thought restructures the field. Every breath recalibrates your voltage. Every emotional surge becomes a command traveling outward like a pulse through circuitry. And every moment of coherence tightens the entire system into alignment. Imagine standing in a vast network of luminous lines, each one shifting with your inner state. When you steady yourself, the lines arrange. When you fracture, they ripple. When you choose a direction with clarity, the entire grid bends to clear a path. This was the ancient image of power, not dominance, not force, but a clean signal moving through a responsive architecture. And she ended with the one line I still hear more than her voice. The code listens to the one who listens to themselves. If you've ever felt reality respond faster than logic, or bend the moment you regain your center, tell me the moment you noticed it. Because that's the day your code began to awaken.